The delicate fabric ripped like thunder. Ilara didn't even have time to gasp before the sound of tearing silk filled the stone corridor, reverberating off the ancient walls of Silvercrest Manor. Frigid air struck her exposed shoulder, then her back, then her ribs. She lurched forward, bracing herself against the rough stone wall as laughter, sharp, cruel, gleeful, erupted behind her. "Whoops," Vivienne said, her voice saturated with false concern. "How clumsy of me." Ilara's hands trembled as she clutched the ruins of her dress to her chest. The pale blue gown, the only decent thing she owned, painstakingly mended over 3 sleepless nights, now hung in shreds around her shoulders. The bodice gaped open. The skirt had split along the seam from hip to hem. She couldn't go out there like this. The Luna selection ceremony was happening right now, just beyond the massive oak doors at the end of the hallway. Every unmated she-wolf in the Northern Territories had been summoned to Silvercrest Manor for tonight's ritual, the night when Alpha King Dominic Nightshade would choose his mate from among the gathered females. Every she-wolf except Ilara wasn't actually a she-wolf at all. She was human, ordinary, powerless, and she had no idea why the summons had included her name. "What's wrong, little sister?" Cassandra purred, stepping closer. Her crimson gown, velvet, imported, worth more than Ilara had seen in her entire life, swished elegantly as she moved. "Not going to join the ceremony." Ilara's stepsisters had waited until this exact moment, until she was dressed, her dark hair braided with wildflowers she'd gathered herself, her heart hammering with equal parts terror and impossible hope. They'd waited until she was walking toward the ceremony hall. Then they'd struck. Vivienne's wolf claws had done the work. One swipe, calculated and vicious, the dress hadn't stood a chance. "Father will be so disappointed," Vivienne added, inspecting her nails with exaggerated boredom. Red polish gleamed in the torchlight. "When you don't show up, when you embarrass our family name." "I didn't ask to be summoned," Ilara whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "No," Cassandra agreed, her smile razor sharp. "But you were, and isn't that just fascinating?" The unspoken question hung heavy between them. Why would the Alpha King's summoning magic call a human girl? Ilara didn't have an answer. She'd wondered the same thing for 3 weeks, ever since the royal courier had appeared at her stepfather's estate with a scroll bearing her name in silver ink. Her stepfather, Lord Brennan, a minor pack beta, had nearly fainted. Her stepmother had looked like she'd swallowed poison. Her stepsisters had smiled. They'd been planning this moment ever since. "Enjoy the hallway," Vivienne said cheerfully, linking arms with Cassandra. "We have an Alpha King to impress." They swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume and swishing skirts, leaving Ilara alone in the corridor with her ruined dress and burning eyes. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't. The doors to the ceremony hall were 30 feet away. She could hear music drifting through, haunting, primal, layered with harmonies that made something in her chest ache with longing she didn't understand. She could smell pine smoke and night-blooming jasmine, the scents of the ritual. She couldn't go in there, not like this, but she couldn't go home either. The summons had been a royal command. Failure to appear was an insult to the Alpha King himself. Ilara pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall and tried to think. Maybe there was a servant's entrance. Maybe she could slip away before anyone noticed, claim illness, invent some excuse. "Are you planning to attend?" a voice said from behind her. Low and rough and impossibly close. "Or are you waiting for the ceremony to come to you?" Alara spun around so fast she nearly tripped over her destroyed skirt. A man stood in the corridor. No, not a man. Something more. Something that made every instinct in her body scream both run and stay in the same desperate breath. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that seemed to swallow the torchlight. Dark hair fell across his forehead, just touching sharp cheekbones. His eyes were amber, not brown, not gold, but true burning amber, like a wolf's eyes caught in firelight. They were fixed on her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. Alara's voice failed. She clutched her ruined dress tighter. I can't." Those amber eyes dropped to the torn fabric in her hands. Something dangerous flickered across his face there and gone too quickly to name. "Who did this?" His voice was softer now, careful. Like he was trying very hard to control something violent beneath the surface. "It doesn't matter." "It matters." The certainty in those two words made her shiver, made her stepsister's laughter feel suddenly very far away. Without another word, the stranger reached up and unfastened the cloak from his shoulders. It was heavy, lined with fur, deep midnight blue so dark it was almost black. A silver wolf's head was embroidered over the heart, the royal seal. Alara's breath caught. You're cold," he interrupted, draping the cloak around her shoulders before she could protest. It swallowed her completely, warm and smelling of pine forests and winter storms. His hands lingered on her shoulders for just a moment. Through the heavy fabric, she felt heat, saw his jaw tighten, watched something like recognition flicker through those impossible amber eyes. Then he stepped back, his expression shuttering closed. "Come," Alpha King Dominic Nightshade said quietly. "You were summoned. You will attend." And Alara, wrapped in the Alpha King's royal cloak, followed him toward the ceremony hall and a fate she couldn't begin to understand. The ceremony hall fell silent the moment they entered. Alara felt every pair of eyes turn toward them, toward her, wrapped in the Alpha King's cloak like some kind of claim she didn't understand. The weight of 100 stares pressed against her skin, suffocating and sharp. Dominic's hand rested at the small of her back, a touch so light she might have imagined it, except she could feel the heat of his palm through the heavy cloak, burning like a brand. "Breathe," he murmured so quietly only she could hear. She hadn't realized she'd stopped. "Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're enjoying stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's episode, it goes even deeper than this. The hall was enormous, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows across stone walls carved with ancient wolf symbols. A massive silver moon hung suspended from the ceiling, slowly rotating, its surface etched with runes that seemed to move in the flickering light. The air hummed with power, old magic, primal and wild, making the hair on Alara's arms stand on end. She-wolves stood in clusters throughout the hall, all dressed in their finest gowns, all staring. some with curiosity, some with barely concealed hostility. Vivienne and Cassandra stood near the front, their expressions frozen in identical masks of shock. "Your Majesty!" An elderly wolf with silver hair and ceremonial robes stepped forward, bowing deeply. "We didn't expect that, we were about to begin the—" "Then begin," Dominic said simply. But he didn't move away from Alara, didn't reclaim his cloak, didn't explain why a human girl stood beside him wearing the royal seal while every eligible she-wolf in the territories watched. The elder's gaze flickered to Alara, then quickly away. "Of course, the Luna selection will commence with the traditional moon blessing. All females will approach the lunar stone when called. And no." The single word cut through the hall like a blade. Dominic's hand tightened fractionally against Alara's back. She felt tension coil through his frame, predatory and controlled. "Your Majesty," the elder asked carefully. "The ceremony is concluded," Dominic said. His voice was calm, absolute, brooking no argument. "Thank you all for attending." The hall erupted. Voices rose in confusion and protest. She-wolves surged forward, demands and questions tumbling over each other. How could the ceremony be concluded when it hadn't even begun? What about the moon blessing, the traditional trials? The Alpha King hadn't even announced his choice. Alara felt dizzy. This didn't make sense. None of this made sense. "Everyone out," Dominic commanded, and power rippled through his voice, alpha command, impossible to resist. The she-wolves began moving toward the exits despite their protests, compelled by ancient authority. "Except you." His amber eyes fixed on Alara. Her heart stuttered. "Me. You." Within minutes, the hall emptied. The massive oak doors closed with a resonant boom, leaving them alone in the candle-lit space with only the rotating silver moon as witness. Dominic stepped away from her, and the sudden absence of his warmth felt like a loss. He moved to the center of the hall where a circular stone platform rose from the floor, the lunar stone, carved from pure white marble and inlaid with silver that caught the candlelight. Ancient pack symbols spiraled across its surface. "Do you know why you were summoned?" he asked without looking at her. Alara's fingers clutched the cloak tighter. "No. Do you know what you are?" "Human," she whispered. "I'm human." Finally, he turned to face her. The candlelight painted shadows across his features, making him look almost otherworldly, dangerous and beautiful and utterly unreadable. "Come here," he said softly. Every instinct screamed at her not to move, but her feet carried her forward anyway, drawn by something she couldn't name. She stopped at the edge of the lunar stone, close enough to see the runes glowing faintly silver. "Give me your hand," Dominic said. She shouldn't. She didn't know this man, this Alpha King who'd given her his cloak and dismissed an entire ceremony without explanation. She didn't know what he wanted or why she'd been summoned or what was happening. But she placed her hand in his anyway. His fingers closed around hers, warm and rough and impossibly gentle. He guided her palm to rest flat against the lunar stone's surface. The reaction was immediate. The stone blazed with brilliant silver light, so bright Alara cried out and tried to jerk away, but Dominic held her hand firm against the marble, his other hand coming up to brace her shoulder. "Don't fight it," he said, his voice strained. "Just breathe." The light crawled up her arm like living silver fire. It didn't burn, but it felt ancient and wild and vast, like touching starlight or moonbeams or something far older than either. The runes on the stone began to move, spinning and reforming, rearranging themselves into new patterns, into words, bloodbound, moon-marked, nightshade. "What does that mean?" Alara gasped. Dominic's grip on her shoulder tightened. When she looked up at him, his amber eyes were blazing with the same silver light that poured from the stone. "It means," he said quietly, and she heard wonder and dread tangled together in his voice, "you were never human." The light faded slowly, sinking back into the stone until only a faint glow remained. Alara's hand tingled where it had touched the marble. She pulled away, stumbling back a step. "That's impossible. I can't shift. I've never—" "You were bound," Dominic interrupted. His gaze tracked something on her wrist she couldn't see. "Someone locked your wolf away before you were old enough to remember." "Why?" The word came out broken. "To hide you." He moved closer, his hand lifting toward her face, then dropping like he'd stopped himself. "From me. I don't understand." "The moon has marked you as my mate," Dominic said softly, and the words landed like thunder in the silent hall. "You've been mine since the day you were born." Alara's world tilted sideways. That's not possible." She backed away from the lunar stone, from Dominic, from the impossible words still echoing in the vast hall. "You're wrong. The stone is wrong. I'm nobody. I'm just a nightshade by blood," Dominic said, his voice maddeningly calm while her entire reality crumbled. "The last daughter of the northern bloodline. Hidden, bound, raised among wolves who knew exactly what you were and chose to bury it. Her step-family, Lord Brennan's household. The way they'd always looked at her, not just with contempt, but with something else, something that looked almost like fear. "My mother was human," Alara whispered. "Yes," Dominic confirmed. "Your father was not." The candles flickered, casting wild shadows across the stone walls. Alara's hands were shaking. She realized she was still wearing his cloak, wrapped in his scent, pine and winter storms, and something wild underneath that made her head spin. "Why?" The question scraped out of her throat. "Why would someone bind my wolf? Why hide me?" Dominic's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he crossed to one of the tall windows overlooking the manor grounds, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Because 23 years ago," he said quietly, "a prophecy was spoken by the Moon Oracle. She said the Alpha King's true mate would be born of two worlds, wolf and human, and that our bond would either unite the territories or burn them to ash." Alara's breath caught. "The old pack leaders didn't want to risk it," Dominic continued. "They feared a half-blood Luna would weaken the throne, weaken me, so they made sure I would never find you." He turned back to face her, and the raw anger in his amber eyes made her take an involuntary step back. "They killed your father when you were 2 years old, made it look like a rogue attack. Then they bound your wolf and placed you with a beta family loyal to their cause, where you would live and die as human, and I would never know what had been stolen from me." The words hung in the air like smoke, choking and thick. "You're saying my stepfather has been my jailer since I was a child," Alara said numbly. "Yes." Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. The way Lord Brennan never looked directly at her. The way her stepmother kept her isolated, forbidden from attending pack gatherings. The way Vivienne and Cassandra treated her like something contaminated. They'd all known. Then why summon me now? Alara demanded, anger finally burning through the shock. Why tonight? Why the Luna selection if you already knew? I didn't know. The admission came out rough, almost pained. The binding was thorough. It hid you from mate sense, from pack bonds, from everything. I spent 20 years searching every territory for a mate I couldn't find, couldn't feel. He moved closer, and she saw something raw flash across his features. Until 3 weeks ago when the binding began to crack. What changed? You turned 23, Dominic said softly. The same age your father was when he met your mother. The same age the prophecy specified. Powerful bindings often break at significant moments. Birthdays, full moons, times of emotional extremity. Alara's birthday had been unremarkable. She'd spent it alone in her room, mending clothes and trying not to think about the fact that another year had passed in her half-life of servitude. But that night, she dreamed of wolves. Silver wolves running through moonlit forests. Amber eyes watching her from the darkness. A voice calling her name in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. She'd woken with tears on her face and the inexplicable certainty that something fundamental had shifted. I felt you, Dominic said, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. For the first time in my life, I felt my mate's presence. Faint, distant, but there, like finding the first star after endless darkness. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his amber eyes. I sent out the summons immediately. Called every unmated female in the territories, knowing you would be among them, knowing whoever had hidden you would have no choice but to let you attend or risk exposing themselves. They tried to stop me anyway, Alara said, remembering her stepsister's cruelty in the hallway, the destroyed dress, the calculated humiliation. Something dangerous crossed Dominic's expression. Yes, they did. What happens now? The question came out smaller than she intended. Dominic studied her face like he was memorizing every detail. Now we break the binding completely, restore your wolf, and deal with the pack leaders who thought they could defy fate itself. And if I don't want this, the words escaped before she could stop them. If I don't want to be your mate, or a Luna, or part of some ancient prophecy, pain flickered through his eyes, quickly masked. Then you walk away. The choice is yours, Alara. It has always been yours. Fate may have marked us, but I won't claim you against your will. The sincerity in his voice undid something in her chest. This powerful alpha king who could command hundreds with a word, who dismissed an entire ceremony without hesitation. He was offering her freedom, even though she could see it cost him. I need time, she whispered. I know. I need to understand what I am, what this means. I know, Dominic repeated gently. He reached up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and carefully lifted the royal cloak from her shoulders. The loss of its warmth made her shiver. But you can't go back to that house, he said. They'll know the binding is breaking. They'll try to stop it, or worse. Then where? Stay here, in the manor. You'll have your own chambers, your own space. I won't pressure you, but I can keep you safe while you decide. Alara looked into those impossible amber eyes and felt the ground shift beneath her feet once more. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." The chambers Dominic gave her were larger than the entire servants' wing at Lord Brennan's estate. Alara stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. A 4-poster bed draped in deep blue velvet, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking forests that seemed to go on forever. A fireplace already crackling with warmth. Bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. A bathing room with a copper tub big enough to drown in. It felt like a dream or a trap. "The staff will bring you anything you need," Dominic said from the doorway. He hadn't entered, she noticed, kept himself carefully on the threshold like he didn't trust himself to come closer. "Clothes, food, whatever you want." "Thank you," Alara said, and meant it despite the chaos spinning in her head. His gaze lingered on her face. "Try to rest. Breaking a binding is difficult. You'll need your strength." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving her alone in luxury she'd never imagined and confusion she couldn't escape. Alara didn't sleep. She tried. She bathed in water that smelled of lavender and honey, put on the silk nightgown someone had left folded on the bed, and lay beneath covers softer than clouds. But every time she closed her eyes, questions swarmed like wasps. "You were never human. Your father was murdered. You've been mine since the day you were born." At midnight, she gave up and moved to the window. The moon hung full and heavy above the forests, painting everything silver. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and tried to feel something, anything that suggested a wolf lived inside her. Nothing. Just her own heartbeat and the distant sound of wind through trees. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, expecting a servant. Dominic entered, carrying a tray with tea and small cakes. He'd changed from his formal clothes into simple black pants and a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the ceremonial armor, he looked younger, more human except for those eyes. Those would never be human. "Couldn't sleep either?" Alara asked. "No." He set the tray on a small table near the fireplace. "I thought you might be hungry. You didn't eat at the ceremony." Because her stepsisters had destroyed her dress and she'd been too terrified to think about food. But she didn't say that. She crossed to the table and picked up one of the small cakes. Lemon dusted with powdered sugar. It melted on her tongue, sweet and tart. "These are incredible," she said without thinking. Something almost like a smile touched Dominic's mouth. "My mother's recipe. The kitchen staff still makes them every week." "Your mother?" Alara sat carefully in one of the chairs, tucking her feet beneath her. "She died when I was 12, Dominic said, settling into the chair across from her. Not close, but not distant either. "Illness, the healers couldn't save her." "I'm sorry," he nodded, pouring tea into 2 delicate cups. "She would have liked you. You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." The simple honesty in those words did something strange to her pulse. Alara wrapped her hands around the warm teacup, letting the heat ground her. "Tell me about the binding. How does it work?" "How do we break it?" Dominic's expression shifted, became more guarded. "Bindings are complex magic. Whoever cast yours used powerful wards, probably blood magic woven when you were too young to resist. It's locked your wolf so deep you can't sense her at all." "Her, my wolf." "Yes," Dominic clarified. She's still there, Alara, sleeping, waiting. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it felt terrifying. A stranger living inside her skin, a part of herself she'd never known existed. Breaking it requires 3 things, Dominic continued. First, identifying the binding's anchor, usually an object or person tied to the original spell. Second, a moon ritual performed at the lunar stone. Third, he trailed off, jaw tightening. Third, Alara pressed. The mate bond, he said quietly. Completed mate bonds can shatter almost any magic. The connection between true mates is more powerful than any spell. Heat crept up Alara's neck. Completed how? Several ways. Dominic's gaze held hers, steady and careful. Marking, blood-sharing, physical consummation. He paused. But I told you I won't force this. We'll find another way. What if there isn't another way? Then we'll make one. The certainty in his voice sent warmth cascading through her chest. This man, this alpha king who should be a stranger, was willing to defy magic itself rather than pressure her. Why? The question slipped out. Why does it matter what I want? You're the alpha king. You could just take what you need. Something dark and angry flashed through Dominic's eyes. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you, Alara admitted. I don't know you at all. Then let me tell you who I am. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the firelight caught in his dark hair. I am the wolf who has been incomplete his entire life, who felt like half a person searching for something I couldn't name. I am the alpha who takes his responsibility to his pack seriously, too seriously, some say. I don't trust easily. I don't forgive easily. But when I give my loyalty, it's absolute. He paused, and his voice dropped lower. And I am the man who felt his mate's presence for the first time 3 weeks ago and knew that I would wait 100 years more if that's what you needed. Because you deserve a choice. You deserve everything that was stolen from you. Alara's breath caught in her throat. I'm scared. I know, Dominic said gently. So am I outside. The moon climbed higher, and somewhere deep in Alara's chest, something that had been sleeping for 23 years stirred for the first time. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of wolves howling. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it crashed back. The ceremony, the lunar stone, Dominic's impossible revelations. Her hand flew to her chest, half expecting to feel different. Changed. She felt exactly the same. A knock sounded at the door, followed by a female voice. Miss, I've brought breakfast and some clothes for you. Alara wrapped herself in a robe and opened the door to find a young woman with kind eyes and dark hair braided down her back. She carried a tray laden with food and had several garments draped over her arm. I'm Natalie, the woman said, stepping inside. His Majesty asked me to attend to you during your stay. I don't need, Alara began. Oh, I know you're perfectly capable, Natalie interrupted with a warm smile. But humor me anyway. It's been ages since we've had anyone interesting at the manor. The Alpha King is brilliant, of course, but terribly serious. You should see the staff's excitement. They're already placing bets on how long before the official bonding ceremony. Heat flooded Alara's cheeks. We're not, there's no. Of course not, Natalie agreed, her eyes twinkling with mischief. That's why he spent 3 hours last night pacing outside your door like a lovesick puppy before finally going to his own chambers. He did not. He absolutely did. Trevor, he's one of the guards, said he's never seen the alpha so rattled. It's quite adorable, actually. Alara didn't know what to do with that information. She busied herself examining the clothes Natalie had brought, simple but well-made dresses in deep greens and blues, riding pants, soft sweaters. Real clothes, not the threadbare servant's garments she'd worn at Lord Brennan's estate. His Majesty requests your presence in the library after breakfast, Natalie said, setting the tray on the table. If you're comfortable with that, of course. He was very specific that I emphasize the if you're comfortable part. Despite everything, Alara felt her lips curve into a small smile. The library was a cathedral of books. Alara stood in the doorway, breathless. Shelves stretched 3 stories high, connected by spiral staircases and narrow walkways. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows, painting everything in jewel tones. The scent of old paper and leather and something herbal, sage, maybe filled the air. I thought you might like it here. Dominic's voice came from somewhere among the shelves. She found him in a corner alcove, surrounded by open books and scattered papers. He'd been researching, she realized, searching for answers about the binding. It's beautiful, Alara said honestly. He looked up and something in his expression softened when he saw her. You look rested. I look like I borrowed someone else's clothes and have no idea what I'm doing, she corrected. That too, he agreed, and there was the ghost of that almost smile again. Come, I want to show you something. He led her deeper into the library to a section that looked older than the rest. The books here were ancient, their spines cracked and faded. Dominic pulled down a massive leather-bound volume and opened it carefully. The history of the northern bloodlines, he said, turning pages until he found what he was looking for. This is your father. Alara stared at the illustration, a man with dark hair and gentle eyes standing beside a massive silver wolf. The name beneath read, Julian Nightshade, second of the Northern House, keeper of the moon's memory. He looks kind, she whispered. He was. Dominic's voice was quiet. I was only 7 when he died, but I remember him. He used to bring me sweets from the human markets and tell me stories about the old magic. He said the barrier between our world and the human world was thinner than most wolves believed. That love could bridge any divide. He married my mother. Yes, it caused a scandal, but your father didn't care. He said she was his heart, wolf or no wolf. Dominic turned another page, showing a painted scene of a wedding. The old guard never forgave him for it. Or you. Alara traced the image with her finger, trying to feel some connection to these strangers who'd given her life. What was her name? My mother. Isabel Monroe. She was a doctor in the human town bordering our territory. Your father was injured during a border dispute, nothing serious, but enough that he needed medical attention. She found him in the woods, half-shifted and bleeding. Instead of running, she bandaged him up and told him he was the most ridiculous patient she'd ever had. Despite everything, Alara laughed. It sounded strange in the quiet library, but Dominic's expression warmed at the sound. They fell in love quickly, he continued. Married within 6 months. You were born a year later. I remember the celebration. The whole pack gathered, and your father was so happy. He kept saying he had the most perfect daughter in all the territories. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. What happened to my mother? After he died, Dominic's expression shuddered. She was human in a wolf's world, alone with a half-blood child the pack leaders feared. They gave her a choice. Let them bind your wolf and place you with a suitable family, or face exile from the territories with no protection, no resources, and enemies who would hunt you both. She gave me up, Alara said numbly. She saved you, Dominic corrected fiercely. She made an impossible choice so you would survive. He paused, jaw clenching. And then she disappeared, left the territories and never came back. I've had people searching for years, no trace. The grief hit unexpectedly for parents she'd never known, a mother who might still be alive somewhere, a father murdered for loving across battle lines. Hey, Dominic said softly. Suddenly he was closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder. Breathe. I can't, there's too much. I know. His hand finally settled on her shoulder, warm and grounding. But you're not alone anymore, I promise you that. Alara looked up into his amber eyes and felt something shift. Not the mate bond, not yet, but something simpler. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. Show me more, she said. I want to know everything. They spent 3 days in the library, 3 days of Dominic teaching her wolf history, pack laws, the intricate politics that governed the territories. 3 days of discovering that she loved learning, that her mind was sharp when given the chance to be. 3 days of stolen glances and careful distance and tension that built like gathering storm clouds. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Alara woke before dawn with pain lancing through her skull. Not a headache, something deeper, like her bones were trying to rearrange themselves from the inside out. She stumbled from bed, gasping, and barely made it to the floor before her legs gave out. The world tilted, blurred. Her vision fractured into strange double images, the room as it was and something else, something wild. She could smell everything. Natalie's lavender soap from 3 rooms away, the horses in the stables outside, rain coming from miles off. And underneath it all, pine and winter storms and Dominic. His scent was everywhere, drowning her, calling to something that suddenly wanted to answer. She didn't remember screaming, but suddenly Natalie was there and then other servants. And then Dominic burst through the door like a force of nature, his eyes blazing amber bright. Everyone out, he commanded. Now! The room emptied in seconds. Dominic dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her trembling body like he wanted to touch but didn't dare. The binding is breaking, he said. Your wolf is waking up. It hurts, Alara gasped. Sweat poured down her face. Her skin felt too tight, like something was trying to claw its way out. I know, and I'm sorry. His voice was raw with helplessness. We need to get you to the lunar stone. It will help guide the transition. Can you stand? I can't. Without asking permission, Dominic scooped her into his arms. The contact sent electricity racing across her skin. She could feel his heartbeat thundering against her cheek, could smell his scent intensifying, could hear a low growl rumbling in his chest that should have terrified her but instead felt like safety. Hold on to me, he said, and she didn't know if he meant physically or something deeper. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. The journey through the manor passed in a blur of pain and heightened senses. Every sound was too loud, every scent too strong. She buried her face against Dominic's shoulder and tried to breathe through it. He kicked open the doors to the ceremony hall and strode directly to the lunar stone. Dawn light was just beginning to filter through the windows, painting everything in shades of pink and gold. "I need to put you down," Dominic said gently. "The stone has to touch your skin." Alara's fingers clutched at his shirt. "Don't leave." "Never," he promised, and the words sounded like a vow. He lowered her carefully onto the lunar stone. The moment her skin touched marble, silver light exploded through the hall, brighter than before Wilder. The runes on the stone blazed to life, spinning faster and faster. And then she felt it, a presence in her mind. Ancient, powerful, furious at being caged for so long. "Sister," something whispered in her thoughts. Finally. "My wolf," Alara gasped. "Yes," Dominic said. He was still beside her, one hand braced on the stone near her head. "Let her in, don't fight it." But Alara was scared. This thing inside her felt huge, primal, nothing like her careful, quiet human self. What if she let it in and disappeared? What if she became something she didn't recognize? Alara! Dominic's hand cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You won't lose yourself. The wolf isn't separate from you. She's been you all along, the truest part of you just sleeping. Let her wake up." "How do you know?" "Because I see her already. In your strength, your resilience. The way you survived years of cruelty and didn't let it break you. That's your wolf, Alara. She's been protecting you even while bound." The words cracked something open in her chest. "Please," the voice in her mind whispered. "Let me protect you properly. Let me be whole." Alara closed her eyes and stopped fighting. The transformation wasn't like in stories. She didn't shift into a wolf, not yet. That would come later, Dominic had explained, with practice and time. But she felt her wolf wake fully. Felt their souls merge into one unified being. Power flooded her veins. Strength she'd never imagined. Senses so sharp the world remade itself around her. She could hear individual heartbeats in the manor below, could smell the morning dew on grass outside, could feel the moon's pull even though it wasn't visible. A silver thread connecting her to something vast and eternal. And she could feel Dominic, not just his physical presence, but him. His emotions bleeding through some invisible connection, relief and wonder and fierce protectiveness and want so intense it stole her breath. The mate bond, incomplete but there, a golden thread stretching between them, fragile and new and terrifying. Her eyes flew open. Dominic was staring at her with an expression that looked like he was seeing the sun for the first time. "There you are," he whispered. Alara sat up slowly. The pain was gone, replaced by a humming energy that made her feel like she could run for miles or tear down mountains. She looked at her hands, still human, but she could feel claws beneath the surface, waiting. "I can feel you," she said, awed and uncertain. "In my head, your emotions." "The mate bond," Dominic confirmed. His hand was still on her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "It's beginning. Once you acknowledged your wolf, the bond could start forming." "I can feel how much you want to kiss me right now," Alara said before she could think better of it. Dominic's eyes darkened to molten amber. "Yes. I can also feel that you're terrified of scaring me away." "Yes," he repeated, rougher this time. Alara's new wolf senses hummed with awareness. She could smell his desire, hear his racing heart, feel his restraint like a physical thing. And for the first time, she understood that this powerful alpha king was just as vulnerable as she was. "Dominic," she said softly. "Yes, I'm not scared of you." His breath caught. "You should be." But they didn't kiss. Dominic pulled back before she could close the distance between them, his control visibly fraying but holding. "Not like this," he said, voice rough. "Not when you're still adjusting, not when the bond is influencing what you feel." Alara wanted to argue that her feelings were her own, but her new wolf senses told her he was right. Everything was heightened, overwhelming. She couldn't separate instinct from genuine emotion yet. "Okay," she whispered. Relief flickered through the bond. Dominic stood and offered his hand, pulling her gently to her feet. "How do you feel?" "Like I could fight an army or run to the ocean, or," she paused, testing her new awareness. "Someone's coming, 3 people, fast." Dominic's expression hardened. "You can sense them." "I can smell them," fear and Alara's nose wrinkled. Desperation. The ceremony hall doors slammed open. Lord Brennan strode in, flanked by 2 older men Alara didn't recognize. Her stepfather's face was ashen, his usual composure shattered. "Your Majesty," he said, the title dripping with barely concealed panic. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The girl, she's not who you think. The lunar stone must have malfunctioned. She's simply a human ward we took pity on." "Enough." Dominic's voice cut like a blade. Alpha power rolled through the hall, making the 3 men flinch. "You will address her as Lady Alara Nightshade, and you will explain why you bound a child's wolf and lied to your Alpha King for 23 years. Lord Brennan's face went from ashen to gray. We were following orders from the Council of Elders. We were told it was for the good of the pack, for stability. You were told to imprison an innocent child," Dominic snarled. "To murder her father and torture her mother into abandoning her. To steal her birthright and her identity." One of the other men stepped forward, elderly, with silver hair and cold eyes. "We did what was necessary. The prophecy was too dangerous. A half-blood Luna would have destroyed everything our ancestors built." "The prophecy said no such thing," Alara said, startled by the strength in her own voice. Her wolf rose to the surface, lending her courage she'd never possessed before. "It said our bond would unite the territories or burn them to ash. You chose to create ash by tearing us apart." The elderly man's lip curled. "You presume to understand prophecy, child. You're a mongrel who shouldn't exist. Your father was a fool who threw away his bloodline for human weakness." Dominic moved so fast Alara barely saw it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had the elderly man by the throat, lifted off his feet. "Say another word about her father," Dominic said, deadly quiet, "and you won't leave this hall alive." "Your Majesty, please." Lord Brennan fell to his knees. "Elder Hawthorne meant no disrespect. We only sought to protect the throne, to protect you from a bond that could weaken." "Weaken me?" Dominic's laugh was bitter. "You spent 2 decades watching me search for something I couldn't find, watching me rule alone, incomplete, half-mad from the emptiness. You think that made me stronger?" He released Elder Hawthorne, who stumbled backward, gasping. "I felt her wake 3 weeks ago," Dominic continued, his voice dropping to something lethal. "Did you think I wouldn't investigate, that I wouldn't discover your conspiracy?" "We were going to confess," the 3rd man said quickly. After the selection, we plan to explain. You plan to watch her humiliated, Dominic cut in. You orchestrated her stepsister's cruelty. You hoped she'd be broken enough, shamed enough that she'd run before I could claim her. Alara's stomach turned. She remembered Vivienne and Cassandra's satisfaction as they destroyed her dress. The calculated timing. They'd been following orders. It was meant to be merciful, Elder Hawthorne wheezed. If she disappeared before the bond solidified, your majesty could have chosen a proper mate, one of pure blood, one worthy of. Get out. Dominic's alpha command cracked through the hall like thunder. All three of you, you are stripped of your titles, your lands, and your pack positions. You will be escorted to the border and exiled from the northern territories permanently. You can't, Lord Brennan began. I am your alpha king, Dominic said, and his eyes blazed with barely restrained fury. I can do whatever I want. Be grateful I'm allowing you to live. Guards appeared. Alara hadn't even heard them enter and seized the three men. Lord Brennan's protests echoed through the hall as they were dragged away. Elder Hawthorne shot one last look of pure hatred before disappearing through the doors. Then silence fell, heavy and absolute. Dominic stood utterly still, his hands clenched into fists, trembling with suppressed rage. Dominic, Alara said softly. I should kill them, he said, not looking at her. For what they did to you, what they took from both of us. But you won't. No, he exhaled slowly. Because you deserve better than a mate who rules through bloodshed and revenge. Alara crossed to him, hesitant but drawn by the pain bleeding through their bond. She placed her hand carefully on his arm. The contact made them both inhale sharply. They spent 23 years trying to keep us apart, she said. Don't let them steal one more moment. Dominic turned to face her finally, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be what you need. I've been alone so long, I've forgotten how to be anything else. Then we'll figure it out together, Alara said. Neither of us knows what we're doing, but maybe that's okay. Through the bond, she felt his walls crack just a little, felt hope kindle beneath the anger and pain. Together, he repeated, like he was tasting the word for the first time. Together, she confirmed. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and in the distance, something howled not in greeting but in warning. The attack came at nightfall. Alara was in her chambers, attempting to read while her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, when every instinct she possessed suddenly screamed danger. She bolted to her feet just as Dominic burst through the door, already half shifted, his eyes blazed amber, canines elongated, claws extending from human hands. Rogues, he snarled. At least 20, they breached the eastern perimeter. How? Someone let them in. His gaze locked with hers, and she felt his fear spike through the bond, not for himself, but for her. They're coming for you. Before she could process that, an explosion rocked the manor. Glass shattered somewhere below. Screams echoed through the halls. Stay here, Dominic commanded. Lock the door, don't open it for anyone but me. You can't fight 20 wolves alone. I'm not alone, I have guards, warriors. Another explosion cut him off. He cursed violently. They're using fire charges, trying to flush us out. Smoke was already beginning to seep under the door. Alara's new senses detected the acrid chemical smell, detected something else too, wrongness. These weren't ordinary rogues. Their scent was corrupted, twisted by something unnatural. Blood magic, she said, the knowledge rising from her newly awakened wolf. They've been enhanced. Dominic's expression turned grim. Elder Hawthorne, he must have had contingency plans. You exiled him hours ago. How could he organize this so fast? Because he's been planning it for weeks, Dominic said bitterly. Since the moment I sent out the selection summons, he knew if I found you, his conspiracy would unravel. A howl split the night closer now, just outside the manor, answered by a dozen more. The sound raised every hair on Alara's body. We need to run, Dominic decided. Get you somewhere safe while I deal with. No. Alara's wolf rose to the surface, lending her a confidence that felt both foreign and completely natural. I'm not running anymore. I spent 23 years hiding. I'm done. You can't fight. You haven't even shifted yet. Then teach me, right now. Dominic stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Alara, first shifts take hours, sometimes days. The pain alone. The bond, she interrupted, an idea forming. You said completed mate bonds can shatter magic. Can they also transfer knowledge, strength? Understanding flickered across his face, followed immediately by resistance. Yes, but that requires a blood exchange. It's intimate, permanent. It would lock the mate bond in place completely. There's no going back from that. Good, Alara said, meeting his gaze steadily. I don't want to go back. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She closed the distance between them, placing her hand over his racing heart. Those wolves are here to kill me because of what I represent, because our bond threatens their power. I won't let them win by cowering while you fight alone. Through the bond, she felt his conflict, the desperate need to protect her warring with respect for her choice, with the primal urge to accept what she was offering. If we do this, he said roughly, there's no undoing it. You'll be mine, I'll be yours, forever. I'm already yours, Alara said softly. Fate decided that before either of us were born, this is just making it official. A crash from downstairs, the sound of claws on marble, snarling. They were running out of time. Dominic pulled a knife from his belt, silver gleaming in the firelight. Your hand! Alara extended her palm without hesitation. The blade cut quick and clean. Blood welled bright red against her skin. Dominic sliced his own palm, then pressed their hands together. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Power slammed into Alara like a tidal wave, Dominic's strength, his memories, his very essence pouring through the bond. She gasped, knees buckling, but he caught her against his chest. I've got you, his voice echoed in her mind. Let it flow. Don't fight it. She felt his first shift at age 12, terrifying and exhilarating. Felt centuries of pack knowledge passed down through alpha bloodlines. Felt battle experience and leadership instincts and the crystalline clarity of wolf senses honed over decades. And underneath it all, she felt his love, raw and overwhelming and absolute. He'd been waiting for her his whole life, and now that he had her, he would burn the world before letting anyone take her away. The knowledge of how to shift crystallized in her mind like muscle memory that had always been there. Now, Dominic said aloud, call your wolf, she'll answer. Alara closed her eyes and reached for the presence she'd felt on the lunar stone. Sister, I need you. Finally, her wolf responded with fierce joy. "Let's hunt." The shift hurt less than she'd expected, or maybe Dominic's strength was buffering the pain through their bond. Either way, her body knew what to do. Bones realigned, muscles reformed, dark fur rippled across her skin. When she opened her eyes, the world had transformed. Colors muted, but scents and sounds amplified 1,000-fold. She stood on 4 legs, smaller than Dominic would be in wolf form, but sleek and powerful. She looked up to find Dominic staring at her with something like reverence. "You're beautiful," he sent through their bond. Then he shifted himself, his massive black wolf towering over her silver-gray form. "Ready," he asked, "to fight, to protect what's ours." Ilara's wolf bared her teeth in what might have been a smile. Always, together they burst from the chambers and raced toward the sounds of battle. The rogues had made a fatal mistake. They'd come to kill a helpless human girl. Instead, they'd face a mated alpha pair. And the moon showed no mercy to those who threatened its chosen. The Great Hall had become a battlefield. Ilara and Dominic descended the main staircase as wolves, their claws clicking against marble slick with blood. Below, Dominic's warriors fought a desperate defense against rogues that moved with unnatural speed and strength. The corrupted wolves' eyes glowed sickly yellow, the unmistakable mark of blood magic enhancement. "Stay close to me," Dominic commanded through their bond. "These aren't ordinary rogues. They won't hesitate, won't retreat." "Neither will I," Ilara replied. A massive gray rogue spotted them and charged up the stairs, jaws slavering. Dominic moved to intercept, but Ilara was faster. Her new instincts took over. She dropped low, letting the rogue's momentum carry it over her, then twisted and sank her teeth into its exposed throat. The kill was clean, efficient, horrifying. Her wolf felt only grim satisfaction. "Good," Dominic sent, pride warming through their bond. "But don't take unnecessary risks. I can't lose you when I just found you." 3 more rogues converged on their position. Dominic took 2 with brutal efficiency while Ilara grappled with the 3rd. This one was stronger, enhanced by whatever dark magic Elder Hawthorne had employed. It caught her shoulder with its claws, tearing through fur to flesh. Ilara yelped, and Dominic went berserk. His alpha power exploded through the hall like a shockwave. Every wolf, friend and foe alike, stumbled under the weight of his rage. He tore into the rogue that had hurt Ilara with savage violence, ripping it apart before it could even whimper. "I'm okay," Ilara said quickly, feeling his terror spike through the bond. "It's just a scratch." "Nothing touches you," Dominic snarled, his wolf mind barely coherent with protective fury. "Nothing hurts you ever again." The mate bond pulsed between them, and Ilara felt something shift. Their connection deepened, strengthened by shared combat and spilled blood. She could sense his position without looking, could anticipate his movements. They began fighting as a unit. Where he advanced, she flanked. Where she drew enemies in, he eliminated them. Together, they were devastating, but the rogues kept coming. "They're not trying to win," Natalie's voice cut through the chaos. The servant girl stood at the top of the servants' staircase, clutching a silver blade. "They're buying time for something." "She's right," Ilara sent to Dominic. "This is a distraction." Dominic's wolf mind sharpened with understanding. Elder Hawthorne. He's here somewhere, attempting something while we're occupied. The lunar stone, Alara realized with sudden clarity. If he can corrupt it with blood magic, she didn't need to finish. The lunar stone was the heart of pack magic in the Northern Territories. Corrupting it would poison the land itself, weaken every wolf bonded to it. Go, Dominic commanded. I'll hold them here. Alone? There are too many. I'm the Alpha King. This is what I do. His wolf met her eyes across the blood-soaked hall. But I need you to stop whatever Hawthorne is planning. You're the only one who can reach the ceremony hall in time. Alara's wolf wanted to refuse to stay and fight beside her mate, but she could feel through their bond that he was right. His warriors were rallying now, forming defensive positions. Dominic could hold this hall. The lunar stone was vulnerable. Don't die, she sent fiercely. Not a chance. We have forever to start living. Alara bolted for the corridor leading to the ceremony hall, leaving her mate to his battle. The ceremony hall doors hung open, torn from their hinges. Alara shifted back to human form as she entered. She'd need hands for whatever came next. Her dress was shredded from the fight, blood streaking her arms and legs. The shoulder wound throbbed but was already beginning to heal, accelerated by Dominic's alpha blood flowing through their mate bond. Elder Hawthorne stood at the lunar stone, surrounded by 5 robed figures chanting in an ancient language. Dark magic swirled around them like oil-slick smoke. The stone itself was cracking, silver light bleeding through the fractures, corrupting to sickly yellow. "Stop!" Alara shouted. Hawthorne's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock. "Impossible! You should be dead!" "The rogues failed," Alara finished. She walked forward slowly, letting her wolf rise to the surface. Her eyes must have been glowing because Hawthorne took an involuntary step back. "Just like you've failed, just like everyone who's tried to tear us apart has failed." "You stupid girl," Hawthorne spat. "You don't understand what you are, what you'll bring. The prophecy speaks of fire and ash. You'll destroy everything." "The prophecy speaks of choice," Alara corrected. She was close enough now to see the lunar stone clearly. The cracks were spreading, but the silver light still fought the corruption, still burned bright at the core. "Unite or burn, we chose unity, you chose ash." "You chose wrong." Hawthorne raised his hands and dark magic coalesced around him. "I won't let a mongrel half-breed destroy centuries of pure bloodlines." He hurled the magic at her like a spear. Alara didn't dodge. She didn't need to. She called on the mate bond, on Dominic's strength flowing through her veins. On her own newly awakened power, Nightshade blood, pure and ancient despite what Hawthorne believed. On her mother's human resilience, the ability to love across impossible divides. Silver light exploded from her hands, meeting Hawthorne's dark magic midair. And where they collided, the darkness shattered like glass. Hawthorne stumbled backward, staring at his hands in disbelief. "How? You haven't even completed the bonding ritual." "We completed it the moment we chose each other," Alara said softly. She walked toward the lunar stone, ignoring the chanting figures who scattered at her approach. "Blood, choice, and love, that's all a bond needs." She placed both hands on the cracked stone, and the lunar stone sang. The lunar stone's song filled Alara's mind, ancient, wordless, vast as the moon itself. She understood now what it had been trying to tell her all along. The prophecy wasn't a warning, it was a promise. A choice offered to every generation. Unite the fractured pieces of their world, or let old hatreds burn everything to ash. Her ancestors had chosen ash. Fear, division, she chose differently. Silver light poured from her hands into the stone, pure and cleansing. The cracks began to seal, the yellow corruption burning away like morning fog. Through the mate bond, she felt Dominic's presence, distant but growing closer. The battle in the great hall winding down. "I'm here," she sent to him. "I have the stone." Relief crashed through their connection so powerfully it nearly broke her concentration. Elder Hawthorne screamed in rage and lunged at her, claws extended. But before he could reach her, a massive black wolf burst through the ceremony hall entrance and slammed into him with the force of an avalanche. Dominic's wolf pinned Hawthorne to the ground, jaws at his throat. The elderly man froze, whimpering. "Don't kill him," Alara said quickly. "Please." She felt Dominic's wolf struggle with the command. Every instinct demanded he rip out the throat of the man who'd tried to murder his mate. But slowly, with visible effort, he released Hawthorne and shifted back to human form. "Why?" Dominic demanded, his voice raw. Blood streaked his bare chest from a dozen wounds already healing. "Why spare him after everything he's done?" Alara kept her hands on the lunar stone, still channeling healing light into its core. "Because we're choosing unity over ash. Because killing him makes us what he always feared we'd become." "Mercy," Hawthorne spat from the ground. "You think mercy makes you strong, it makes you weak. And when the other territories see a half-blood lunar on the throne, they'll see exactly what the moon intended." A new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see an ancient woman standing in the doorway. She wore robes of midnight blue, her hair white as starlight. Power radiated from her like heat from a flame, different from wolf magic. Older. Stranger. "The Moon Oracle," Dominic breathed, immediately dropping to one knee. Alara wanted to do the same, but she couldn't release the stone yet. The corruption wasn't fully cleansed. The oracle walked toward them with slow, deliberate steps. When she reached the lunar stone, she placed one weathered hand over Alara's. Immediately, the healing accelerated. The cracks sealed completely. The stone blazed with pure silver light, brighter than Alara had ever seen. "Child of two worlds," the oracle said, her voice layered with harmonics that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond the physical realm. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I healed the stone," Alara said uncertainly. "You proved the prophecy true." The oracle's eyes, completely white, no pupil or iris, fixed on her with unsettling intensity. 23 years ago, I spoke the words that set this path in motion. I told them your bond would unite the territories or burn them to ash. They heard only the threat. They missed the promise. "What promise?" Dominic asked, rising to stand beside Alara. "That true unity requires those who belong to both sides, who understand division because they've lived it." The oracle's hand moved from Alara's to rest on the now perfect lunar stone. A Luna who is wolf and human, an Alpha who is power and compassion. Together, you are the bridge the territories have needed for centuries. "The other Alphas will never accept a half-blood Luna," Hawthorne said from the floor, his voice bitter. "They'll challenge, they'll kneel," the oracle interrupted. Or they'll fall. The moon has chosen, the stone has accepted, and any who stand against the moons will are standing against fate itself. She turned back to Alara. But you must choose too, child. The stone is healed. The bond is formed. But to truly become Luna, to claim your birthright and your power, you must accept the full weight of what that means. You cannot be half committed, half present. You must be all in, or you must walk away now while you still can. Alara's heart hammered. Through the bond, she felt Dominic's fear spike, not of her answer, but of influencing it. He was carefully, deliberately keeping his emotions locked down, refusing to pressure her through their connection. She looked at him, really looked at this powerful alpha king who'd waited 23 years for her, who'd given her choices when he could have taken, who'd been willing to wait 100 more years if that's what she needed. Then she looked at the lunar stone blazing with silver light, at the power thrumming through her veins, at the potential spread before her, not just as Dominic's mate, but as something more. A leader, a bridge, a Luna who could change everything. She thought of her father, murdered for daring to love across boundaries, of her mother, forced to give her up to keep her alive, of 23 years spent powerless and hidden and small. She was done being small. I choose this, Alara said clearly. I choose him, I choose the pack, I choose to be Luna. The oracle smiled. Then kneel before the stone, both of you. Dominic immediately dropped to his knees. Alara joined him, their hands finding each other automatically. The oracle placed her hands on both their heads. By the authority of the moon, by the power of fate, by the bond that cannot be broken, I name you Alpha King Dominic Nightshade and Luna Queen Alara Nightshade. May your reign bring unity to the fractured, healing to the wounded, and hope to those who have forgotten how to dream. Power crashed over them like a wave. The mate bond blazed white-hot, fusing completely. Alara gasped as she felt herself and Dominic merge into something greater than either of them alone, not losing themselves but becoming more. When the light faded, they were no longer just two wolves. They were Alpha and Luna, bonded, crowned, forever. 3 weeks later, Alara stood at the window of chambers she now shared with Dominic, watching the full moon rise over the forests. So much had changed. Elder Hawthorne and his conspirators were imprisoned, awaiting trial before the Council of Alphas. The rogues who'd survived the attack had been questioned. Most were victims themselves, coerced through blood magic and threats to their families. Lord Brennan had fled the territories entirely. Her stepsisters had sent a formal apology she hadn't yet decided whether to accept. The manor had been rebuilt. The pack had settled into cautious acceptance of their new Luna. And Alara had spent every day learning what it meant to be both wolf and leader. But tonight was different. Tonight was the Luna's moon, a ceremony where she would be formally presented to the assembled alphas from all territories, where they would either accept her or challenge Dominic's right to rule with a half-blood mate. "You're nervous," Dominic said from behind her. She felt him approach through their bond before his arms circled her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Terrified," Alara admitted. "What if they reject me? What if this causes a war?" "Then we'll face it together." Dominic's lips brushed her temple. "But they won't reject you. They can't. You've already done more for pack unity in 3 weeks than the Council has accomplished in decades." It was true. She'd spent her time visiting the human settlements that bordered wolf territories, establishing diplomatic relations that had never existed before. She'd opened the Manor's library to scholars from both worlds. She'd even tracked down 3 other half-blood wolves who'd been hiding their heritage and brought them into the pack, proving they could thrive. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. "The Oracle sent word," Dominic said, his voice warming with something like amusement. "She says to tell you that fate doesn't make mistakes, and that you should stop doubting yourself or she'll make the trip here personally to knock sense into you." Despite her nerves, Alara laughed. "She really said that." Her exact words included more creative threats, but I'm paraphrasing. Alara turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become everything to her in such a short time. Mate, partner, friend. The bond between them was a constant presence now, comfortable as breathing, strong as steel. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "That you didn't get to choose someone easier?" Dominic's expression softened. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I chose you the moment I felt your presence 3 weeks before we met. I chose you when I gave you my cloak. I chose you every second of every day since. And I would choose you again in every lifetime, every universe, every possible version of our story. Even though I can't shift as fast as pure bloods, even though half the council thinks I'm an abomination. Especially because of those things," Dominic said fiercely. "Because you faced more in 23 years than most wolves face in a lifetime, and you're still standing, still fighting, still choosing compassion over bitterness." His forehead touched hers. "You make me better, Alara. You make all of us better." Through the bond, she felt the absolute truth of his words. A knock sounded at the door. "Your Majesties," Natalie's voice called. "It's time." Alara took a deep breath. Dominic's hands tightened on her face for just a moment. "Remember," he said softly, "you don't have to prove anything to them. You've already proven everything that matters to the moon, to me, and to yourself. Tonight is just formality. Formality that could start a war. Then we'll face it." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips, brief but full of promise. Together. Always together. The ceremony ground was packed with wolves, hundreds of them from every territory. Alphas and betas and warriors, all gathered under the full moon to witness the Luna's presentation. Alara could smell their curiosity, their skepticism, their fear. She walked beside Dominic through the assembled crowd, wearing a gown of midnight blue that Natalie had commissioned, simple but elegant, with the nightshade crest embroidered in silver over her heart. Her dark hair was unbound, falling down her back in waves. She looked exactly like what she was, half human, half wolf, and wholly herself. The crowd parted as they approached the lunar stone, which had been moved outdoors for the ceremony. It blazed with silver light, reflecting the full moon overhead. The assembled alphas formed a semicircle around the stone. Alara recognized some from the research she'd done. Alpha Preston of the Eastern Forests, a grizzled warrior with scars across his face. Alpha Simone of the Southern Plains, young and sharp-eyed. Alpha Griffin of the Western Mountains, ancient and wise. Alpha King Dominic, Preston said formally. "You've called us here to witness the Luna's crowning, but many question whether a half-blood can truly carry the title, whether the moon's blessing is genuine or mistake." "The moon doesn't make mistakes," Dominic replied, his voice carrying easily across the silent crowd. "And I didn't call you here to debate my mate's worthiness. I called you here to witness what you should have witnessed 23 years ago, the rise of the Luna the prophecy promised." "Pretty words," Simone said coldly. "But words don't prove legitimacy. Let her place her hand on the lunar stone. Let the moon judge whether she's truly worthy." It was a test, a challenge. If the stone rejected her, every wolf present would see it as proof that she didn't belong. Elara met Dominic's eyes. Through the bond, she felt his steady confidence in her. She walked to the lunar stone alone. The crowd held its collective breath. Elara placed her palm flat against the marble surface and opened herself to whatever judgment would come. The stone didn't just glow, it sang. Silver light exploded upward in a column that pierced the night sky, visible for miles. The moon overhead seemed to brighten in response. And when Elara looked down, she saw new runes forming on the stone's surface. Not words, but images. A silver wolf and a black wolf running side by side. Two worlds united. The prophecy fulfilled. 1 year later. Elara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Dominic's arm draped across her waist. She smiled, settling deeper into the warmth of their bed, listening to his steady breathing. Through the mate bond, she could feel him still half asleep, content and peaceful in a way that had taken months to achieve. The alpha king who'd spent decades wound tight with responsibility had finally learned to rest, because he wasn't alone anymore. "I can feel you thinking," Dominic mumbled against her shoulder, his voice rough with sleep. "It's too early for thinking." "I was just remembering," Elara said softly. "A year ago, I was a servant girl who didn't know what she was, who thought she'd spend her whole life invisible and powerless." Dominic's arm tightened around her. "And now I'm lying in bed with the Alpha King, trying to decide which diplomatic crisis to tackle first today." She turned in his arms to face him. His dark hair was mussed, his amber eyes still heavy-lidded. He'd never looked more beautiful. "How did this become my life?" "Fate," Dominic said simply. "And stubbornness, mostly stubbornness." She laughed and swatted his chest. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips, pressed a kiss to her palm right where the scar from their blood exchange still marked her skin. "The Eastern Forest delegation arrives this afternoon," Elara said. "Alpha Preston wants to discuss the half-blood integration program. He's identified 4 young wolves in his territory who have been hiding their human heritage. He's come a long way from questioning your legitimacy." "We all have." It was true. The year since her Luna's crowning had been tumultuous but transformative. The Council of Alphas had accepted her, some grudgingly, others with genuine warmth. The territories were learning to work together in ways they hadn't in centuries. And the half-blood wolves who'd spent their lives hiding were finally stepping into the light. Small changes, slow changes, but lasting ones. "There's something I need to tell you," Dominic said, his tone shifting to something more serious. Elara's heart skipped. Through the bond, she felt his nervous excitement. "What is it?" "We found her," he said softly. "Your mother." The world tilted. Alara sat up so fast she nearly knocked Dominic in the chin. What? Where is she? Is she alive? Alive and well, living in a human city 3 territories south, working as a doctor. Dominic sat up beside her, taking both her hands. She's been following news of the Northern Territories. When she heard about the new Luna, about you, she sent a letter to the manor. It arrived yesterday. Tears blurred Alara's vision. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I wanted you to be ready, because I know how complicated this is. His thumbs traced circles on her hands. She wants to meet you, but only if you want to meet her. No pressure, no obligation. Alara's throat tightened with emotion. Her mother, the woman who'd given her up to save her life, who disappeared rather than watch her daughter be raised by wolves who hated what she was, who'd carried that sacrifice for 23 years. I want to meet her, Alara whispered. I need to. Dominic pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face against his chest as the tears finally came. Not sad tears, overwhelmed tears, grateful tears. Tears for the lost years and the found future and everything in between. We'll arrange it, Dominic murmured into her hair. Whenever you're ready, wherever you want. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the morning light and the bond that had changed everything. That evening, after the diplomatic meetings and pack business and endless responsibilities of ruling, Alara and Dominic walked through the forests together. It had become their ritual. Every night, regardless of how busy the day had been, they shifted and ran through the moonlit trees. Sometimes they hunted. Sometimes they simply ran for the joy of it. And sometimes, like tonight, they walked in human form, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Do you remember, Alara said, when you told me you'd wait 100 years if that's what I needed? I meant it, Dominic said. I know, but I was thinking, I'm glad you didn't have to wait. I'm glad I was brave enough to choose this. Choose you, choose all of it. Dominic stopped walking and turned to face her, moonlight painting silver highlights in his dark hair. You've always been brave, long before you knew you were a wolf, long before the mate bond. You survived 23 years of cruelty and didn't let it make you cruel. That's the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Alara reached up to cup his face. We make each other brave. That's what the bond is, I think. Not one person completing another, but 2 people making each other strong enough to face whatever comes. Wise words for someone who's only been Luna for a year. I have a very patient teacher. Dominic's smile was soft, private, the one he saved just for her. I love you, he said, simple words but weighted with everything they meant. Forever, choice, unity. I love you too, Alara replied, in this lifetime and every other one. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. The mate bond hummed between them, strong and steady as a heartbeat. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Dominic's eyes were blazing amber bright. Run with me, he asked. Alara grinned and shifted, her wolf form sleek and silver in the moonlight. Dominic shifted beside her, massive and black as midnight. Together they ran through forests that belonged to them and to no one, under a moon that had chosen them for reasons they'd never fully understand. Toward a future they would build together, not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Behind them the manor stood warm with lights, full of pack members who'd learned to accept their half-blood Luna. Around them, the territories were slowly, painfully learning to work together. Ahead of them lay challenges they couldn't yet imagine, but also joys worth fighting for. And between them, the mate bond blazed like starlight, unbreakable and eternal. The prophecy had promised unity or ash. They chose unity. Every single day, they chose unity. And the moon, ancient and knowing, smiled down on her chosen children as they ran through the silver-touched darkness. Two wolves who'd been born into division but would live in hope. Together, always together, forever. Up next, you've got two more incredible stories waiting on your screen. If this one hit you, tap to watch the next, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Oh, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see where you're watching from.